On my flight to Scotland, my mom bombarded me with 31 texts demanding I cancel my $12,750 honeymoon and fly home to babysit my siblings or be disowned. Have you ever had one of those moments? That single, gut-wrenching text that rips your entire life into shreds, just when you thought everything was finally perfect. For me, it hit at 6:41 a.m., standing in a dreary Heathrow customs line, 21 hours into my honeymoon. The first 3 words from my mother made my knees physically buckle. Emergency family gathering. I watched my new wife, Harper, read it over my shoulder. Her sleepy smile melted into a look of pure dread, then something like recognition. We'd been married for less than a day. For 9 months, we'd poured every ounce of our spare time and $12,750 of hard-earned cash into planning this trip of a lifetime to Scotland. Highlands, distilleries, ancient castles. This was our dream. But before I could even process the first message, another one popped up, equally chilling. Your sister Madison fractured her leg. Someone has to babysit the kids. You must return home today. Not, can you? Not, is there any need? It was a command, a summons, as if I were just an employee she could call in at will. And honestly, for 29 years, that's exactly what I'd been. The oldest of 5, I became the family's 3rd parent at age 10. That's when my mom went back to school for her master's, with evening classes and all-day Saturday study sessions. My dad was always at his sports goods store, especially on weekends and holidays. Someone had to watch Madison, then 7, the 5-year-old twins Carter and Dylan, and baby Sienna, who was just 3. That someone was me. I learned to make mac and cheese before long division. I changed diapers while my friends played Little League. While they had sleepovers, I read bedtime stories and checked for monsters under mattresses. By 13, I wasn't just babysitting, I was running the house. Grocery shopping with my mom's food money envelope, cooking dinner most nights, spaghetti, tacos, chicken nuggets, nothing fancy, just what a kid could manage. I helped with homework, broke up sibling fights, administered Band-Aids and Tylenol. I knew Sienna was allergic to strawberries and that Carter wouldn't eat his sandwich unless it was cut into triangles. My parents would beam, praising my maturity and dependability. Teachers called me an ancient soul. Neighbors thought I was wise beyond my years. No one, not once, ever questioned why a 13-year-old was doing the job of 2 adults, or why my parents seemed perfectly content to delegate their responsibilities to their child. This pattern didn't stop. High school? Forget the basketball team. Practice ran until 5:45, but someone had to meet the school bus at 3:05. Sienna had a dance recital, but my parents had unbreakable commitments. My mom had a meeting in Phoenix. My dad had inventory weekend. I only went to one high school party in my entire life because leaving the kids overnight wasn't an option. Their idea of family time was me babysitting while they went out for dinner and a movie. Then came college. I got into Berkeley with a half scholarship, my absolute dream school. And my mom? She just stirred her coffee at the kitchen table, like we were discussing the weather. We need you here, she said. The children rely on you. Berkeley is really far away. So, I went to the State University. I lived at home, commuted 35 minutes each way, worked part-time at the campus bookstore to save money, and rushed home every afternoon to make sure my siblings were fed and started on their homework. By then, Mom had her master's and was a vice principal, but her hours never aligned with anyone's needs but her own. Dad was still at the store, still unreachable. At 23, I graduated with a civil engineering degree and landed a great job building municipal water systems. Good pay, real career prospects. I moved into an apartment exactly 7 miles from my parents' house. 7 miles. That was the furthest I could mentally rationalize going, because someone still had to be accessible for the kids. That's when Harper walked into my life. She was a pediatric occupational therapist at the Children's Hospital. Smart, funny, and incredibly insightful. Unsettlingly insightful at first. We'd been dating for 4 weeks when she dropped a casual question over Thai takeout. So, how often do your parents actually parent their own children? It hit me like a physical blow. I just told her about canceling our dinner plans the night before because my mom needed me to watch the kids for a retirement party. They parent them. I snapped back, defensive. They're just busy. It's easy for me to help. Harper just gave me that long, piercing gaze. You didn't help out last night. You were a parent. There's a distinction. I had no answer. She didn't push it then, but she watched. She saw me constantly cancel plans because my mom would call with some emergency, which usually just meant inconvenience. She watched me spend weekends driving my siblings to soccer games and birthday parties while my parents attended their own social events. She saw my phone light up at all hours with texts like, "Dylan needs poster board for an assignment due tomorrow. Can you pick up Sienna after gymnastics? I'm running late. Carter left his trumpet at home. Can you bring it to school?" Always phrased as questions, but functioning as mandates. Because if I said no, I would be forsaking my siblings. And I loved my siblings. I loved them deeply. They felt like my children in ways that were probably unhealthy, but absolutely genuine. When I proposed to Harper after 3 years, she said yes instantly. Then she added, "Seriously, we need to talk about boundaries before we get married, because I will not spend our marriage coming second to your parents' convenience." So, we went to premarital counseling. Dr. Elise Thornton, a therapist specializing in attachment and family systems, didn't pull any punches. She asked questions that made me sweat. When was the last time you said no to your parents? Never. Did you get paid for childcare? No. Have they ever thanked you? Not really. Do you recognize this as exploitation? The word hit me like a splash of ice water. Exploitation. Not helpful. Not familial support. Exploitation. 5 months before the wedding, we set limits. I told my parents I would no longer be available for regular childcare. I'd happily assist in true emergencies, but Saturday soccer games and forgotten lunchboxes didn't qualify. My mother wept, real tears, dabbing her eyes with a tissue like I'd just announced my imminent death. "After everything we've done for you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We raised you. We sacrificed for you, and now you are abandoning your family." The guilt trip was masterful, refined over decades. But Dr. Thornton had prepared me. "You are not abandoning anyone," she'd said. "You are creating age-appropriate boundaries. You are an adult son getting married, not an unpaid babysitter." My father's response was colder. "Okay," he said, "but don't expect us to bend over sideways if you need something someday." The message was clear. Our family relationships were transactional. I offered free labor. They offered what? Conditional affection and reluctant approval. I tried not to think about it. The wedding was beautiful. A small ceremony with 85 guests at Harper's favorite botanical park. My parents came. They smiled for photos. They gave a toast about how delighted they were. My mother cried again during the ceremony, and I wanted to believe it was genuine emotion, not a performance designed to make me feel guilty. We scheduled the honeymoon for late August, when Harper's hospital schedule cleared. Scotland. Harper had dreamed of it since she was a child. We planned every detail. Flights from LAX to London to Edinburgh, rental cars, cozy Highlands inns, distillery tours, castles. We saved every cent, avoided eating out, worked extra hours, and put every birthday and wedding gift directly into the fund. Total cost for 13 days, $12,750. I told my parents 8 months in advance. 8 months! I gave them more than half a year to make alternate childcare arrangements, plan around my absence, and accept that my life did not revolve around their demands. My mother just nodded blankly and said, "That's nice, honey," as if I'd told her I was trying a new coffee shop. No questions about the itinerary. No excitement for my first international trip. No appreciation of how significant this was. Just utter indifference. That should have been my first red flag. But I was foolish enough to think our boundaries were working. That my parents had accepted I was no longer their go-to solution. Looking back, I can't believe how naive I was. They'd spent 19 years teaching me to be accessible, to drop everything, to put their wants first. 5 months of therapy wasn't enough to undo that kind of brainwashing. The first cracks appeared 4 weeks before our flight. My mother called on a Sunday morning, while Harper and I were making breakfast. "I need to talk to you about something," she stated, her voice taking on that serious, administrative tone. "Your father and I have an invitation to a wedding in Portland on September 4th. We hoped you could watch the kids that weekend." September 4th. That was right in the middle of our trip. We'd be exploring Loch Ness, seeing Urquhart Castle. I quickly responded, "I can't. I'll be in Scotland. I told you months ago." A long, pregnant pause. "So, couldn't you postpone? Just a few days?" "We simply cannot miss this wedding. It's your father's cousin's daughter." The sheer audacity was breathtaking. They wanted me to postpone my honeymoon, so they could attend a wedding for someone I'd met twice. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "we paid $12,750 for this trip. The flights alone were $4,200, and they're non-refundable. The hotels are booked and paid for. I am not postponing my honeymoon." Her voice changed, shifting to that familiar, wounded tone that had always made me cave. "I just assumed family would come first. I had no idea we were such a hassle now that you're married." There it was. The accusation. The manipulation. Family comes first, which, in her vocabulary, meant your demands are irrelevant. Only ours matter. I held firm. It was harder than it should have been. "You'll need to hire a babysitter or find another option. Harper and I are going to Scotland as planned." She hung up without saying goodbye. The silent treatment began. No calls, no texts, no answers. It took 6 days for her to finally respond when I tried to reach my siblings. Her text read, "We found someone, a neighbor's daughter. She's charging us $240 for the weekend. I hope you have a wonderful trip." That subtle, antagonistic jab about the expense was typical, especially considering they regularly spent more than that on their own date nights. They had money for social activities, but hated paying for childcare. The math only worked if my labor was worth zero. We left LAX on August 28th, flying overnight to London. I'd given my parents the precise dates, emailed them our itinerary, warned them we'd be unreachable at times in the Highlands. My mother's terse reply, "Fine." My father hadn't replied at all. The silent treatment continued, and honestly, it was a comfort. No guilt trips. No last-minute pleas. No manufactured crises. Harper and I boarded the plane, exhausted and excited, cuddling in our economy seats, finally relaxing for the first time in weeks. Our flight landed at Heathrow at 3:52 p.m. London time. We had a 2-hour stopover before our connection to Edinburgh. Time for bad airport food, stretching our legs, trying to fight jet lag. I turned off airplane mode on my phone, partly out of habit. It took about 45 seconds to connect to the international network. Then it exploded. It vibrated relentlessly, a cacophony of notification sounds that made other passengers glare. My gut sank before I even looked. Because I knew. Of course I knew. I had 31 messages. 16 from my mother, 9 from my father, from Madison, 3 from family friends I barely interacted with. All sent in the 9 hours we'd been over the Atlantic. All marked urgent. All screaming catastrophe in that way that makes your chest constrict. Even when you know, intellectually, it's probably contrived drama. I opened my mother's texts first. They were time-stamped starting at 7:48 a.m. Pacific, when our plane was somewhere over Greenland. Madison shattered her leg this morning and tumbled down the stairs. She's currently in surgery. This is serious. So where are you? We need you home right now. Then, I can't believe you aren't responding amidst a family emergency. And finally, your sister may have died and you're unreachable. My hands started shaking. Madison was 22 now, living at home while finishing her nursing degree. A broken leg was severe, painful, yes, but surgery? Unless it was complicated or multiple fractures. I wanted to call immediately. We were still in the terminal, announcements blaring. Harper read over my shoulder, her face going ashen. "Oh no," she gasped. "Is she okay?" I didn't know yet. We found a quiet corner near a closed shop. I called my mother. She answered on the first ring. Eventually, she snapped. No hello. No acknowledgement that I'd been on a plane for 9 hours. Just fury. "Where have you been?" Her voice was tight, piercing, but not filled with despair. Not the voice of someone whose daughter had just had emergency surgery. "We were on a plane," I explained, trying to stay calm. "What happened? Is Madison all right? What kind of surgery?" My mother sighed deeply, dramatically. She slipped down the basement stairs this morning, carrying laundry. "The doctor says she shattered her tibia in 3 places. They had to put a rod in. She'll be non-weight-bearing for at least 7 weeks, possibly 9. I was dialing the hospital number on my phone, ready to speak to someone directly. "Okay, that's really serious. I'm so sorry she's going through that. Is she out of surgery? Can I speak to her?" My mother made a disgusted sound. "She's in recovery, very drugged. She's not available for phone calls." Then came the punchline, the real reason for the frantic texts. "We need you to come home. Someone needs to keep the kids while we take care of Madison. Your father and I cannot handle everything alone. You need to cut your trip short and return today." There it was. Not, "Madison is dying and wants to see you." But, "We don't need family help during a medical crisis. We need you to come home and babysit because we have more important things to do." Carter and Dylan were 19 now, sophomores in college. Sienna was 17, a high school senior. They weren't little kids needing constant care. They were practically adults. "Mom," I said, my voice dangerously low. "The twins are 19. They're old enough to care for themselves and help Sienna. I don't understand why you need me to fly home from Scotland on the first day of my honeymoon to babysit teenagers." A long, terrifying silence. "I can't believe you've gotten so selfish. Your sister just had surgery, and you're concerned about your trip." There it was again. Trip, not honeymoon. Making it sound frivolous, optional, something I could skip without consequences. "This isn't a trip," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "This is my honeymoon. We saved for months. We paid $12,750 for this. The flights are non-refundable. We just arrived 5 hours ago. Madison is going to be okay. A fractured leg is horrible, but it's not life-threatening. And the kids are teens, not toddlers. They don't need me there." My mother's voice turned frigid. "If you don't come home, you shouldn't bother returning to this household. You've chosen a vacation above your sister, your siblings who rely on you, and this family. And I'll make certain that everyone understands who you've become." The threat hung in the air, familiar and ugly. Emotional blackmail, her chosen weapon, honed over decades. "I hope Madison heals quickly," I murmured, my voice wavering slightly. "We'll check in tomorrow, but we won't be home early. We just arrived." I hung up before she could reply. Harper was staring at me, wide-eyed. "She threatened to disown you," she said slowly, "because we didn't cancel our honeymoon to babysit teenagers." Put that way, it sounded utterly absurd. And yet, it was the same dynamic I'd been trapped in for 19 years. My wants were irrelevant, My limits didn't matter. My existence wasn't important except as a resource for my parents to exploit. We boarded the plane to Edinburgh. That short flight was meant to be a chance to breathe, reset, and truly begin our honeymoon. Instead, I sat glued to my phone, watching texts pile up. My father chimed in. Your mother is distraught. Madison is asking for you. The children are afraid. This is what you chose. We landed in Edinburgh at 9:05 p.m. local time. Picked up our tiny, right-hand drive Nissan hatchback, which already made my American brain hurt. Drove 45 minutes to our first hotel, a renovated Victorian mansion with uneven floors and a fireplace. It should have been amazing. The start of everything we'd planned. Instead, I perched on the edge of the bed and dialed Madison's mobile. I desperately needed to hear from her that she was okay, that this wasn't the 5-alarm situation my mother described. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice muffled and distant. Hey, she said. Mom said you weren't coming home. I'm in Scotland, I explained gently. I'm on my honeymoon. I'm really sorry about your leg. That sounds awful. How do you feel? She was silent for a moment, and I could hear the faint beeping of hospital equipment. It sucks. The surgery hurt, and the painkillers make me feel weird, but I'm fine. The doctor said it was a clean break. The hardware seems good. I'll be on crutches for a while, but I should recover well. Relief washed over me. A clean break. A good prognosis. Not the medical catastrophe my mother had predicted. So, why is Mom claiming this is a family emergency that requires me to fly home? I asked carefully. Madison sighed. She's freaking out because someone needs to help me get around. And apparently she can't handle that, let alone managing the household where Carter and Dylan are adults and Sienna is 17. I'm not sure why she acts like they're 7 years old. There it was. The truth. Simple, but infuriating. My mother didn't want a parent. She wanted me to come home and resume my role as an unpaid caregiver so she wouldn't have to deal with her own daughter's injury. Maddie, I said, I'm not flying home. I'm so sorry, but I gave them 8 months' notice about this trip. They had time to plan. This is my honeymoon. I know, she said, sounding tired. I told Mom about it too. I told her the twins could help me, and I didn't need you to fly home from Scotland. But she's all about family obligations and how you've changed since you married. It's exhausting. We talked for a few more minutes. I reassured her I loved her. I wanted to hear about her recovery. She insisted I enjoy my trip and ignore our mother's dramatics. When we hung up, I felt slightly better. My sister wasn't dying. She didn't need me there. This was a manufactured crisis, just as Dr. Thornton had warned. But the texts kept coming. My mother, my father, and then extended family members whom my parents had clearly recruited as reinforcements. My Aunt Marjorie, I can't believe you would abandon your family like this. What is wrong with you? My Uncle Raymond, your mother is crying. Come home and fix it. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly voiced concerns about my selfishness, my cruelty, my complete lack of family values. The psychological assault was relentless. Every day, dozens of messages repeating the same themes: bad son, bad brother, selfish husband, family destroyer. Harper watched me spiral. We were supposed to be touring. Edinburgh Castle, walking the Royal Mile, drinking whiskey in cozy pubs. Instead, I was glued to my phone, reading accusations and guilt trips, my anxiety spiking with every notification. On our 3rd day, after I had spent 2 hours in our hotel room responding to texts instead of hiking the Highlands, Harper gently but firmly took my phone. This has to stop, she said. They are ruining our honeymoon. You are letting them ruin our honeymoon. We need help. We found Dr. Maren Whitaker, a family systems therapist in Portland who offered telehealth sessions. She specialized in emotional abuse, parentification, and toxic family dynamics. We scheduled an emergency video call that afternoon. sitting in our Edinburgh hotel room overlooking the city as Dr. Whitaker listened to me explain 19 years of exploitation and the current crisis. She didn't interrupt, just took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. Finally, she explained, "What your parents have done is called parentification. It's a type of emotional abuse where parents inappropriately delegate adult responsibilities to their children. You have been exploited since the age of 10. You gave up your childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood to raise their children. And now they're escalating because you finally set a boundary." She spoke with clinical detachment, stating facts, not passing judgment. The emergency they've created where you must cancel your honeymoon to care for teenagers who do not require intensive care is a control tactic. They're seeing if you'll break and revert to old habits. And flying monkeys? That refers to a family-wide attack where relatives are recruited to harass you. It is deliberate abuse. Hearing a licensed professional with credentials describe this as abuse changed something in my brain. It wasn't just Harper being overprotective or me being overly sensitive. This was real, documented, clinical abuse. Dr. Whitaker gave me homework, document everything. Every text, voicemail, guilt trip, dates, times, exact wording. "If your parents escalate further," she warned, "you may require legal representation. I want you to have evidence." I assumed she was being paranoid. I didn't realize how right she was. We spent 5 days in Edinburgh, then drove north into the Highlands. The scenery was breathtaking. Rolling green hills, ancient castles on cliffs, lochs as clear as glass. We visited Stirling Castle, drove through Glencoe, stopped at small distilleries. It should have been perfect, but my phone was constantly buzzing, sometimes with 60 messages a day. My mother's texts ranged from hurtful to aggressive to openly threatening. "You're destroying the family. Everyone knows what you did. There will be consequences for this betrayal." Then, on September 4th, 5 days into our trip, my mother sent a text that made my blood freeze. "Because you have abandoned your responsibilities, we're filing a formal complaint with Adult Protective Services. The twins and Sienna are being neglected because you are not present to care for them properly. Enjoy Scotland while you can." I showed it to Harper, my hand shaking. "Can she do that?" I asked. "Can she report me to APS for not babysitting?" Harper, who'd spent years dealing with bureaucratic nightmares in pediatric medicine, looked skeptical. APS is for elderly or disabled adults who are abused or neglected. Your siblings are teenagers with no custody arrangements. I don't think there's any mechanism for that complaint to stick. Dr. Whitaker was more direct in an emergency session later that evening. "Your mother is bluffing," she stated flatly. "She's attempting to scare you into returning home. But she's also creating a paper trail that could backfire spectacularly, because she's effectively documenting that she can't parent her own children without the unpaid labor of her adult son. That will not look good if any agency actually investigates." She was right about the bluff. No one from Adult Protective Services ever called. But the threat had been made, and it lingered in my stomach like poison. 3 days later, on September 7th, I received a call from an unknown Oregon number. I answered wearily, expecting a telemarketer. Instead, a professional male voice asked, "Is this Logan Pierce?" I confirmed. "This is Troy Hallane with Child Protective Services. I'm calling because we received a concerning report about minors in your household." My brain stuttered. "Minors in your household?" "I'm sorry," I said. "I have no minors in my household. I am on my honeymoon in Scotland. Are you certain you have the right person?" Troy Hallane sounded puzzled. "The report identifies you as the primary caregiver for 3 minor siblings, Carter, Dylan, and Sienna Pierce. It states that you abruptly stopped caring for the children without making alternative arrangements, putting them in danger." The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. "My mother filed that report," I stated, my voice flat. And she lied. Carter and Dylan are 19 years old. They are adults. Sienna is 17. But she is with our parents, who are her legal guardians. I am their 29-year-old brother. I have no custody, guardianship, or legal responsibility over any of them. I am on my honeymoon with my wife. There was a prolonged pause. Could you describe your relationship with your siblings and your role in the household? Troy asked cautiously. So I told him everything. The parentification that began at age 10. The 19 years of unpaid childcare. The boundaries I set before getting married. The honeymoon we'd planned for months. My mother's insistence that I cancel everything to babysit teenagers who did not require intensive care. And the escalating harassment and threats. Troy listened without interruption, and I could hear him typing notes. After I finished, he said something that changed everything. Mr. Pierce, I want to be very clear about something. The report we received was filed by your mother. In an attempt to make you appear neglectful, she has made several concerning admissions about her own parenting. He explained that CPS would perform a home evaluation within 72 hours. They would interview the children, assess living conditions, and determine whether adequate care was being provided. For the record, Troy stated, you are not in any legal trouble. You're an adult sibling without a custody arrangement. Your mother's claim that you abandoned minor children is factually incorrect. 2 are adults and 1 is in her legal custody. But her admission that she cannot adequately care for her children without your constant presence is deeply concerning. We hung up. I immediately contacted Dr. Marin Whitaker again. CPS is investigating my parents, I said, still processing the surreal irony of it, because my mother tried to report me for not babysitting. Dr. Whitaker was quiet for a moment before saying something that will stay with me forever. Logan, if CPS finds problems, it is because they exist. Not because you failed to conceal them, but because your parents have been neglecting their children while using you as a cover. You've been so effective for so long that the system never noticed what was really going on beneath the surface. She was correct. I'd been the Band-Aid on a wound that would never heal, and now that I had pulled away, the infection was finally visible. CPS conducted their home visit on September 9th. I wasn't there. I was in a small hotel in the Highlands near Loch Ness, trying to enjoy a distillery tour while my stomach churned with anxiety. Troy Hellane called me later with his findings. Mr. Pierce, I wanted to give you an update personally. We made an unannounced home visit this morning at 9:40 a.m. We identified several areas of concern. He listed them in that careful, clinical manner social workers use. The house was disorganized and dirty, with dishes stacked in the sink, overflowing laundry, and little fresh food in the refrigerator. Dylan answered the door because his parents were still sleeping at 9:40 a.m. on a Thursday. Sienna had missed 4 days of school that week with no documented reason or parental contact. Troy continued, we interviewed each minor child individually. They all stated that you had previously been in charge of most household management, childcare, and emotional support. They described feeling confused and overwhelmed by your absence because they were unsure how to handle basic tasks that your parents had never taught them. The 19-year-olds reported being expected to fill your role, receiving no guidance or support. Your 17-year-old sister, his voice softened slightly, expressed feeling abandoned by both you and your parents. To be clear, she stated that she understands you're on your honeymoon and believes your mother is being ridiculous, but she feels abandoned by your parents, who appear unable or unwilling to engage in parenting now that you're not there to manage everything. Troy stated that CPS was opening a case. My parents would have to complete a parenting capacity assessment, attend mandatory family counseling, and show they could meet their children's basic needs without relying on their adult son. If they do not comply, or if Sienna's situation deteriorates after the twins move out, as they have stated they intend to do, we will need to consider alternative placement for her. The weight of it settled on me. My absence had revealed such profound parental inadequacy that the state stepped in, and my mother had caused it by attempting to weaponize CPS against me. My parents' calls stopped after the CPS visit. The silence was eerie, unsettling, but the flying monkeys increased. Family members I barely knew were calling Harper's workplace, attempting to have her fired for corrupting me and destroying our family. Someone wrote on my firm's Facebook page that I was an abusive brother who had abandoned his disabled sister. My mother had apparently launched a full-fledged public relations campaign, telling anyone who would listen that I'd refused to help during a medical emergency, that I'd called CPS on them out of spite, and that I was a monster who prioritized money and vacations over family. The lies were so prevalent and confidently delivered that some people actually believed them. Dr. Whitaker had predicted this. When you stop enabling dysfunction, the dysfunctional people will rewrite history and paint you as the villain, she'd warned. Because admitting that they are the problem would necessitate self-reflection and change, which they are incapable of. It is easier to blame you. I knew she was correct intellectually, but reading messages from cousins calling me evil, seeing my name dragged through the mud on social media, having my reputation shredded by people who didn't know the truth, hurt in ways I wasn't expecting. On September 11th, 5 days before our scheduled flight home, I received an email from an attorney named Daniel Cross of Cross Family Law Group. He specialized in parental alienation, exploitation, and harassment. Dr. Whitaker had referred him to me because he believed I might need legal representation due to my parents' escalating behavior. I've reviewed the documentation Dr. Whitaker forwarded. With your permission, he wrote, you have a compelling case for harassment, defamation, and possible parental exploitation. I'd like to discuss your options during a free consultation. We had that consultation at a pub in a small Highland village. Harper and I huddled around my phone at a corner table as Daniel Cross explained our legal options in simple, straightforward language. Bottom line, he stated, your parents have no legal right to your time, money, or labor. You are not responsible for their children. You never were. Any suggestion that you have a legal obligation to provide childcare is completely false. He explained that the defamation, telling people I was abusive, neglectful, and cruel, could be actionable if it harmed my professional reputation. The harassment campaign through third parties could support a restraining order. I recommend documenting everything, which you already do, Daniel said. Every message, call, social media post. If you want to pursue a cease and desist letter, I can write one. It would formally notify your parents to stop contacting you directly or through intermediaries, making false statements about you and leaving you alone. It's not legally enforceable like a restraining order, but it establishes a paper trail and demonstrates your seriousness. When most people realize there are actual legal consequences, they usually back down. Harper and I decided to have the letter drafted. Just having an attorney, someone with legal expertise on our side, made me feel less powerless against the onslaught. We finished our honeymoon. We visited more castles, drank more whiskey, and hiked through breathtaking landscapes that didn't seem real. But every moment was clouded by my phone buzzing with abuse, the knowledge that my family was imploding, and the creeping guilt that maybe I should have just returned home. We flew back on September 12th, landing in Los Angeles. After 14 hours in the air, I turned off my phone's airplane mode and braced for the usual avalanche. Instead, I received a single message from an unknown number. Hello, it's Carter. I got a burner phone, so Mom can't monitor this. Can we please talk? I called him from baggage claim. He answered immediately, his voice tight and strained. Are you back? He asked. Just landed, I said. What's happening? Are you okay? Carter was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice cracked. Mom and Dad are telling everyone that you called CPS to destroy the family. They claim you made everything up to punish them. Aunt Marjorie and Uncle Raymond were here yesterday, and it was like an intervention about what a terrible person you've become. He paused, Dylan, and I know it's not true. We've been trying to hold it together since you left, and it's been a nightmare. Mom barely functions. Dad works, then just zones out in front of the television. Sienna is struggling, and no one is helping her. The CPS lady was here, and honestly, she should have come years ago. But Mom is acting as if you orchestrated this. I didn't call CPS, I explained carefully. Mom called them herself, attempting to get me into trouble. But when they investigated, they discovered real problems. That is not my fault, Carter. That is on Mom and Dad for failing to parent without my help. He made a sound that could have been either a laugh or a sob. I understand. Dylan knows. We're not stupid. We've been witnessing this dysfunction our entire lives. You leaving has made it impossible to ignore. And we're done. His voice was full of relief, guilt, and exhaustion. My 19-year-old brother sounded like he had aged a decade in 2 weeks. Dylan and I are moving into an apartment together in 6 weeks. We've already signed the lease. We can't do it anymore. I'm sorry you're stuck with this, I said, truly meaning it, but you're making the right decision. You cannot give up your life to parent your parents. They must figure it out themselves. We talked for another 25 minutes, me and the twin I'd helped raise, whom I'd taught to ride a bike, assisted with math homework, and counseled through breakups. He talked about the apartment, his plans, his fear of leaving Sienna behind. I assured him that Sienna would be fine, that CPS was monitoring the situation, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone you love is to let the system work. The next day, Harper and I met with Daniel Cross at his downtown Portland office. He was older than I expected, probably in his early 60s, with gray hair and that calm professionalism that screamed expensive. We sat in his conference room and reviewed everything. The texts, the voicemails, the social media attacks, the CPS report, the fake emergency, the harassment campaign. Daniel took detailed notes. When we finished, he sat back, folding his hands. This is one of the clearest cases of parental exploitation and subsequent retaliation I've encountered, he said. You have extensive documentation. Dr. Whitaker's assessment provides expert validation. The CPS investigation corroborates your account. If your parents attempt any legal action against you, which they won't because they'd lose immediately, we can shut it down instantly. Can they actually sue me for anything? I asked because at this point, I truly didn't know what was possible. Daniel shook his head. They could file a frivolous lawsuit, sure. Anyone can sue anyone, but they have no standing. You have no legal obligation to provide childcare for siblings. The concept doesn't exist in law. If anything, you'd have stronger grounds to sue them. 19 years of unpaid labor, lost educational opportunities, emotional damages. I don't recommend that route. Family litigation is expensive and traumatic, but you'd have a viable case. He slid a document across the table. This is the cease and desist letter. If you authorize it, I'll have it delivered tomorrow. The letter was formal and unambiguous. My parents were to cease all direct contact with me or Harper. Stop recruiting third parties to contact or harass us. Stop making false statements about us to family members or on social media. And cease all attempts to hold me responsible for childcare or financial support of my siblings. Failure to comply would result in legal action, including restraining orders and potential defamation suits. It was harsh. It felt necessary. Harper and I signed the authorization. Daniel promised to handle delivery and follow up. Fair warning, he said as we left. People like your parents tend to either back down completely or escalate dramatically when served legal papers. There's rarely middle ground. Be prepared for either response. The cease and desist letter was delivered on September 18th at 3:12 p.m., according to the courier's tracking. My mother called 22 minutes later. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. 3 minutes of pure hysteria. Screaming, crying, accusations so garbled I could only catch fragments. Ungrateful lawyer. Destroying the family, never forgive. My father called next. When I answered, his voice was cold and distant. So this is what we've come to. You're threatening us with lawyers because we asked for help with your own family. The reframing was masterful. Demanding I cancel my honeymoon had become asking for help. And 19 years of exploitation had vanished entirely from their narrative. Dad, I said, my voice steady, you didn't ask for help. You demanded I cancel my honeymoon to babysit teenagers. When I said no, Mom faked a medical emergency severity, weaponized my siblings against me, recruited extended family to harass us, and then accidentally got CPS called on herself. That's not asking for help. That's abuse. Long silence. Then, if that's your perspective, I don't think we have anything more to discuss. He hung up. That was the last direct contact I had with either parent. The flying monkeys persisted for a few more weeks, but Daniel sent cease and desist letters to the most aggressive ones, and the messages gradually stopped. My parents had apparently decided that complete estrangement was preferable to accountability or change. The CPS case continued for 5 months. Troy Hallane updated me periodically. My parents had completed 2 parenting assessments. Both scored poorly on measures of emotional availability, child engagement, and understanding of developmental needs. They attended 4 sessions of mandatory family counseling, then stopped showing up, claiming the therapist was biased and didn't understand their family. The house conditions had improved marginally, mostly because Carter and Dylan had been doing cleaning and cooking before they moved out. Sienna was back in school consistently, but her grades had dropped, and she told her school counselor she felt emotionally neglected at home. The issue is that your parents are barely meeting minimum standards, Troy explained in one call. They're not abusive in ways that would justify immediate removal, but they are profoundly inadequate parents. Your sister essentially parents herself, gets herself to school, makes her own meals, manages her own schedule. Your parents provide a house and financial support, but almost no emotional engagement or practical guidance. He sounded frustrated. Unfortunately, inadequate parenting isn't usually grounds for removal unless it causes demonstrable harm. But we're monitoring closely, especially now that the twins have moved out and your sister has lost her buffer. In January, for months after we'd returned from Scotland, Carter called me with news. Madison is moving out, he said. She found a job at a hospital in Seattle and she's transferring to finish her nursing degree up there. She's leaving in February. My first thought was relief that Madison was getting out, followed immediately by worry about Sienna. What about Sienna? I asked. Carter was quiet. She's counting down the days until she turns 18 in May. She's already been accepted to state and she's planning to live in the dorms. 5 months and she's out. She just has to survive until then. Survive. The word hit hard. My baby sister, the 3-year-old I'd helped raise, now having to survive in her own parents' house until she could legally escape. Is she safe? I asked. Carter sighed. Physically, yeah, but emotionally, Mom and Dad barely talk to her. They're like roommates who ignore her. She eats dinner alone in her room most nights. When CPS came to check on things last month, she told them everything was fine because she's so close to aging out that she doesn't want to risk getting put in foster care. She'd rather be lonely than in the system. It made sense, but it broke my heart. In March, I got a call from Sienna herself. We hadn't talked much since I'd been back. A few short texts, nothing substantial. But now, she called, her voice small and uncertain. Hey, she said. I wanted to tell you something before you heard it from someone else. I got into state, full-ride academic scholarship. I'm moving into the dorms in August. Pride flooded through me, mixed with relief. Sienna, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. A full ride is amazing. She laughed, but it sounded sad. I basically raised myself this year. Did all my college apps alone, wrote my essays alone, figured out financial aid alone. Mom and Dad didn't help with any of it. They didn't even ask. We talked for over an hour, my sister and I, about her plans and her fears and her hope for a future where she didn't have to parent herself. She told me she'd been in therapy through her school counselor, working through the realization that our parents' neglect wasn't normal or acceptable. She said she understood why I'd left, why I'd set boundaries, why I couldn't keep sacrificing my life for their dysfunction. I don't blame you, she said quietly. I'm going to do the same thing once I'm out. I'm going to build my own life, and they can figure out how to function without using their kids as unpaid labor. The CPS case closed in May, right before Sienna's 18th birthday. Troy called to let me know. We're closing the case since all the children are now adults, he said. For what it's worth, I want you to know that you didn't cause this situation. Your parents did. You just stopped enabling them to hide their inadequacy. Your siblings are all going to be okay. They're smart, resilient, and getting out. That's the best outcome we could have hoped for. He paused. And Mr. Pierce, what you did, setting boundaries, protecting your marriage, refusing to sacrifice yourself, that took real courage. Your siblings learn from watching you that it's possible to choose yourself. That's a gift. My parents still haven't spoken to me. It's been 20 months since the honeymoon, since the boundary that broke our family. I've seen them 4 times in that period. 3 times at a distance at family events, where we stayed on opposite sides of the room. Twice at the grocery store, where my mother literally turned her cart around and left when she saw me. They look older, smaller, diminished somehow. My mother's hair has gone almost completely gray. My father has developed a stoop. They look like ordinary aging people who made catastrophic choices and paid devastating prices. Sometimes I feel sorry for them. Mostly I feel nothing. Madison is thriving in Seattle. Carter and Dylan share an apartment and are doing well at state. Sienna moved into the dorms in August and calls me regularly with updates about classes, friends, her newfound independence. She told me recently that she barely talks to our parents. They call occasionally, she said, but the conversations are stilted and brief. They don't know how to relate to me as a person. They only knew how to relate to me as someone they could use. Now that I'm not available for that, we have nothing. It's sad, but it's also reality. Harper and I just celebrated our 3rd anniversary. We took a long weekend to Cannon Beach, stayed at a small inn, walked on the shore, ate fresh seafood, and actually relaxed. No emergencies. No guilt trips. No manufactured crisis. It was quiet and simple, and exactly what our honeymoon should have been. On our anniversary night, watching the sunset over the Pacific, Harper asked if I regretted how everything had played out. You lost your parents, essentially, she said softly. That's not nothing. Do you wish you'd handled it differently? I thought about it, really thought about it, about Carter's exhausted voice talking about surviving our parents' house, about Sienna doing her college applications alone, about 19 years of my life spent parenting children who weren't mine, about the honeymoon my mother tried to steal. No, I finally said, I don't regret it. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my parents chose control and pride over relationship. I regret that my siblings got hurt. But I don't regret protecting our marriage and choosing our life together. Because if I'd given in, if I'd flown home from Scotland and resumed my role, it never would have stopped. They would have owned me forever. Harper squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, she said. I know that might sound condescending, but I mean it. You chose yourself. You chose us. And you gave your siblings permission to do the same. We sat in silence, watching the sun sink into the ocean. And I felt something I hadn't felt since before the honeymoon. Peace. Real, deep, uncomplicated peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of freedom. Freedom from obligation, exploitation, and the crushing burden of other people's refusal to mature. Sienna sent me a letter 2 weeks ago. Not a text or email, but a real, handwritten letter in the mail. Dear Logan, it began. I've been thinking a lot about what happened with Mom and Dad during the honeymoon. I was confused and angry at first, but now I get it. You weren't abandoning us. You showed us that it is possible to set boundaries. Watching you stand up to them, choosing your own life despite everyone accusing you of being selfish, that taught me something I needed to know. That my worth does not depend on how useful I am to others. That I am free to want things for myself. Thank you for that. I hope you and Harper are happy. You deserve to be happy after everything you've given up for us. Love, Sienna. I called her that evening. We discussed school, her psychology major, her future plans to work with children from dysfunctional families. She sounded light, unburdened, and free in ways she never had growing up. At the end of the call, she said, "Hey, Logan, I am so glad you went to Scotland. I am glad you did not let them ruin your honeymoon. You deserve the trip." My throat tightened. You deserve to choose yourself. Thank you, Sienna. That means a lot. We hung up. I sat in our living room in the house Harper and I purchased last year, and I realized that this quiet evening with my wife, this freedom to build our own life, the absence of constant crisis and manipulation, was worth every painful consequence. My parents expected me to cancel my honeymoon to look after my siblings. When I refused, they attempted to destroy me. They staged emergencies, weaponized my siblings, recruited flying monkeys, threatened legal action, and accidentally imposed CPS on themselves. They lost custody of their children's emotional well-being, lost relationships with all of their children, except through formal politeness, lost their reputation in our extended family, lost their oldest son permanently. And according to relatives I still speak with, they continue to blame me for everything, telling anyone who will listen that I am a vindictive monster who destroyed our family out of selfishness. Perhaps some people believe them. I don't care anymore, because I know what actually happened. Therapy notes, CPS reports, legal files, and my siblings' testimonies all bear witness to this. The truth is devastatingly simple. I wasn't supposed to be their parent. I was supposed to be their son, brother, and family member, with proper boundaries and mutual respect. When I finally stopped being their unpaid servant, the dysfunction they had created through my exploitation collapsed. That is not my failure. That is theirs. And I am free. Finally. Complete and permanent freedom. It's a heavy story, I know. But it's my story, and it took me years to truly understand it. If you've ever felt trapped in a similar dynamic, or had to fight for your own boundaries, I'd really love to hear from you. What was your moment of realization? What did you choose to do? Share your thoughts in the comments below.